Now, folks, over to you, sir.
Great, thank you very much. Can everyone hear me? Perfect, good. I was here last year when it was still DeFi Live. Very excited to be back, and nobody could hear me last year, so I wanted to make sure that that came across. My name is Sean Kiernan. I'm the CEO of Greengage, which is a startup digital merchant bank. Today is a really big topic. I think this was also a very big panel last year. And I thought, given that it's such a big topic, we would do some introductions first, just to say who we are. But I've also asked Shaman to give some definitions, given that it's a wide background in the audience. So I'll start first just with some introductions, and Paolo, perhaps from you first.
Okay, thanks Sean for having us here. My name is Paolo Guida. I am a partner and the head of investments at VC based in Switzerland called Blockchain Valley Ventures. We have two basically ways of investing. One is through equity, and the other one is through tokens. So we thought we had to be able to deploy capital on both sides of the capital structure. We have invested mostly in blockchain and fintech or future of finance type of project. As a background, I've done several things in my life, but I would say probably one of the most qualifying experiences I was with Lehman Brothers when Lehman went under. I was in the financial advisory group, so it was very clear what it was coming, and I find many analogies with what has happened with DeFi recently. I think we're going to talk about that later on. So and lastly, I also am a contributor to Forbes, so I do like to publish some pieces of research on, for example, certain topics I'm passionate about. So if you are interested, happy to share with you more about that.
Hey guys, my name is Alejandro Gutierrez. I am the co-founder and operations lead of Defactor. A little bit about me and Defactor. So we have been one of the first companies to bring real-world assets into the DeFi space. I've been working in this project for the last 3.5 years with the likes of MakerDAO, Centrifuge, Aave, and some other protocols out there. Our idea is to create a sustainable path for DeFi, right? And we believe that real-world assets is that path. So, thank you.
Hi guys, my name's Shaman. I'm the founder and co-CEO of the Gem Hunters. We research and review startup crypto projects. We help educate investors on the basic fundamentals of how the space is progressing, some of the innovation and technology within the space.
Great, thank you all very much. A great panel. We've got a VC, an operator, and an influencer educator. I think the topic being so broad, we hear terms like Web 2, Web 3, DeFi, CeFi. I'm going to ask Shaman just to give some brief definitions. We're going to do a whistle-stop tour of kind of what these words mean.
Yeah, that's fine. So we sort of specialize, as I said, in breaking down. The space can be really technical and hard to understand for newer, less experienced users. So I think it's really important sometimes to go to the basics and get that basic perspective on what is actually happening. And I think to do that, we have to look back at where it all started. And that was with Web 1.0 or Web 1. And that was 1989. And you know, I sort of remember being back in school using some of the applications. You had like Ask Jeeves, that was the search engine. It wasn't Google back then. I feel old now. You know, you had, I loved MSN and MySpace, that was all part of Web 1. But then in 2004, slightly after the dot-com bubble, you had the emergence of Google, and then you had the integration of video, social media, blogging. But what you also had was centralized entities sort of dominating the space. And this is where the issue sort of started. I'll also add there that it was more centralized, as I said there, but it was dominated by fiat currencies. And this brings us now to Web 3.0 or Web 3. I think what sort of defines Web 3 is it's decentralized, and it's sort of incorporated into the blockchain. It's a layer on top of the blockchain. And what it's trying to do is, rather than being consumer-based, which was sort of what Web 2 was orientated around, the big platforms, you know, like Google, Twitter, Facebook, Web 3 is trying to give more ownership to the users. It's trying to bring that decentralization, and it also is based, as I said, on blockchain, and it uses cryptocurrency, you know, Bitcoin, and all the different. It brings us to this subject now, the tokenization. And on another stage there, you've seen a lot of centralized platforms recently proving that centralization doesn't work in a decentralized space. So yeah, I'll finish there.
That was a really good set of definitions. If I may, to Paolo, we have kind of talked about tokenization as an expression of Web3. Why isn't everything tokenized yet? I mean, natively digital, natively non-digital, where are we and where is this going?
Okay, I think it's a very good question. So first, I think, we have seen, personally, it was like relatively new to blockchain in 2017, 2018. So I had to learn during the first 6 months when I was basically parachuted into this role of deploying capital into blockchain projects. And the first 6 months, I basically sit idle. I did nothing. I just was there to try to learn. And many of the projects which were coming to us were basically a Web3 version of Web2 projects. So it was like tokenizing shares, tokenizing real estate, tokenizing everything. Now, I think the big problem at that point was that they were just reinventing or readapting like an old model using a new technology, but basically rebuilding the same tech and the same user experience. So if you already have like a Crowdcube, you already have a crowdfunding platform, you have already those things working, why do you need a Web3? Does it make any sense? Probably not really. Second thing is like the same type of say problems regarding building liquidity, building user base and so on also took basically the same time length to develop. So I think the problems are multifold but I think first of all is a cultural thing. The Web3 community is very self-contained. It doesn't, how can I say, talk to other people who are there and trying to do the same stuff. So we always tell and sing the same song, and we tell each other that we are good and that we can be better and it's going to be decentralized and so on. After a number of years, how many real successful tokenized platform are around and become like a very important players? Probably not many. So I think it's a matter of culture, it's a matter of understanding why decentralization matters, if it really matters. Plus there are also so many other little aspects. If you own 1% of a building, what do you do with that, right? Does it really make sense to own it?
That's a really interesting point, right? Because we are seeing, this year especially, I've seen people that are starting focusing more and more on actually creating realistic or real business models around the technology instead of actually creating a tech stack, right, that is going to be providing a solution that realistically nobody's going to use. And that's what we have been seeing for the last 4 years. Fantastic tech stack, a lot of technology, but it's always based on the same story. It's like, okay, there's blockchain there, right? There is crypto there. And I think at the point, right, when we stop focusing on the technology and we're providing real solutions for people, that's when we're going to have actually that change. And that's when the whole paradigm is going to just switch into real solutions, right? And you're right, from the tokenization perspective, it was just applying a new technology to the same business models, the same concepts. And I think that's a huge mistake. And I believe that one of the things that Web3 is going to be able to generate is just change from the financial perspective, especially. It's just changing dramatically the perception of finance and how financial services are provided. That's the possibility that is there. It's a completely different system with a way fairer manner to mitigate risk and to provide liquidity to the people that are in need right now, because there are a lot of people and companies out there that they are not covered, and DeFi can provide that, right?
I think we touched on the natively digital and the natively non-digital, and it seems this expression makes a lot more sense to start in the natively digital area to look at Web3. It'd be great to hear from Defactor. We talked about some of your experience with MakerDAO and Centrifuge and what you've done there. How have you started to interpret this in a real-life business?
Well, it has been a really interesting experience, right? And we ended up with MakerDAO by pure chance. We had a company, it's called Console Freight, and Console Freight was providing trade finance, inventory finance, and factoring solutions. And we were looking for liquidity, and we were knocking on so many traditional doors, and everybody's like, oh, it's too complex, we don't get it. Blockchain, it wasn't the right time. And by chance, we actually just bump into the guys from MakerDAO and say, we like that, that's great. Do you want to use our internet magic money to do this? So like, yeah, definitely. And from there, actually, we started realizing the opportunity and the huge opportunity that DeFi has, right? And this is just completely linked about tokenization of assets. So we say, look, if we have the chance to just get these invoices, these bill of ladings, goods, right? We just create our detailed representation of them. We put them into the blockchain for everybody has traceability from the investors to validators, to community, to even the asset originator, because it's at all value actually for asset originators that are the financial providers to understand where they are at in the financial cycle. That realistically doesn't happen in the traditional space. And when you take, right, that the whole added value that DeFi is putting there for everybody, it makes sense, right? Are we ready yet? Probably not. And there is a lot of work that needs to happen in the UI UX, because one of the things that is a huge failure at the moment is UI UX. If you want to bring financial companies into the DeFi space that already have complex processes, and you added extra layers of complexities, people will try it once, twice. They will say, yeah, that's fantastic. Call me when it's ready, because it's not ready. Yeah. And that's one of the things that everybody's focusing right now. Right.
A question for Shaman. You're obviously passionate about education in the space. There's a lot of new technologies, new firms coming around. Some people say that the young perhaps have a more native understanding of some of these trends because they've lived through kind of a lifehood or life through a digital realm. What do you think are ways for various age groups to engage and learn more about the space?
I actually focus on this a lot because I feel like understanding the entire space does get harder the older you get. So, you know, I started in crypto in 2017. I just hit 30, and I sort of felt like it was my last. I felt like it was my last chance to have that energy, to have that. And I was the first generation to have come into this world where we grew up with, you know, computers. So it was easier for me than it was, for example, somebody that's older. But I definitely see the change now because the younger people that are coming in, they are sort of, they have that advantage of understanding the technology. It's much easier, but there's also other areas which I think younger people lack, you know, such as ethics and, you know, work ethics, you know, in some respects. I obviously can't speak for everyone, but, you know, from personal experience, the industry that I was involved in, you just saw that sort of, you saw younger people degrading in that area, but technically they were definitely more superior and able to sit behind screens for longer periods, for example, able to take in the information easier. But I think that people's attention spans are reducing as well. You know, you're seeing this massively. You know, we're also involved in marketing, and you're seeing that every single year you have to produce shorter and shorter. You're seeing like the TikTok now, 1 minute videos, and people are getting to a point now where they're like 1 minute's too long. So, you know, it's definitely a case, as you said there, that there's pros and cons to everything. And I think we could sit here all day ripping, you know, and I've got my personal opinions, as everyone has. Maybe I shouldn't go too much into some of those. Might offend some younger people here.
And Paolo, I think we touched on the way that you've seen a lot of different firms. Obviously, as a VC, you're seeing some of the best, the good, bad, the ugly. From your perspective on the Web 2, Web 3, kind of the merge and how these worlds are interacting, do you think that there's a way for us to kind of draw any themes out of this that you think are good for investment theses?
Yes. Well, first, I would say that in assessing, how can I say, Web 2 or Web 3, let's call it like that, old tech and the decentralized project is very similar. So the framework that we use is very similar. There are some tweaks which are related to, especially say, the background of the technical team and how long they've been, for example, in crypto. If they are relatively new to crypto and they just follow like the market hype, then that's a no-go for us. Whereas instead, if they've been for years and they're really, how can I say, passionate about the idea that crypto and the Web3 can enable and unlock, then I think it's a very good course. For the rest, all the valuation criteria, I would say, are more or less the same. When it comes to, say, teams, I think also crypto has become so widespread that you need to have like certain, say, passions or certain interests when it comes to picking certain topics and try to be focused and learn on those topics. So rather than, how can I say, there is a first in, first out approach, or like you get inundated with LinkedIn approaches and so on. I think you need to understand what is the topic that makes you passionate about, and that where you want to do research, where you try to understand what is the market framework, who else is it there is competing, and then you go deep into that vertical. So personal, something that I am researching and looking at the moment is like things, for example, the integration or like the hopefully intersection of centralized finance and decentralized finance, like it was described before. So how can decentralized finance, which by the way I think has a very big reputational problem at the moment, given what has happened recently, can rebuild and restore reputation. So can DeFi, for example, identify a new team? Can DeFi be really useful to the world? And so there are certain things that I think DeFi can do, and much better than traditional financial institutions. And so they have to find a new sense of purpose and a new sense of direction where to go. So that's an example. Another topic, for example, that I've been doing a little bit of research is, I think Web3 is about communities, is about like ownership, is about people who are user and who are also really engaged, shall be engaged. Now, you look at what is the participation rate, you look at what is which is 0. You look at the framework at which certain projects are run. On theory, they are decentralized. In theory, the founder or the early stage investors do hold 50% and plus of the token, and so they're basically taking a decision. If it is like that, it doesn't work. So how you fix, for example, the participation rate within the communities, how do you induce people to care about these things? I think that's really, for example, a big problem that if fixed in crypto, then crypto can have a role, for example, in many other situations. And then I was listening yesterday, was like a very interesting project, which I won't name here, but which was around in the climate tech section, which I really found it fascinating, how you basically can use blockchain technology combined with satellites images to basically make sure that people are accountable, and you track really how the carbon capture and happens, and the decarbonization also is occurs. So those are things, for example, that I personally find fascinating. And so if they do good, if they do something which is like, how can I say, better for humanity, is better for everybody. So I think that's one real life applications, but also with a purpose.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We've seen a lot with tokenization. We've discussed that digitization makes sense where use cases demand that it kind of works, so making things more efficient, but it's often the things you can do on top that make it exciting. One of the areas that I think is of much interest is lending, and we've seen that in the recent crisis, some of the centralized actors did much less. They kind of went bust, as opposed to some DeFi actors that still are in the game. Can you talk, Alejandro, to some of your experience, and where do you think are the use cases that tokenization makes sense and the exciting bits that can be built on top?
Yeah, I think there have been a lot of business cases of tokenization that have failed. One of them, personally, I believe the tokenization of real estate has not peaked as it was supposed to peak. Like, we have been talking about this for 2 years or more, and still it's not realistically a clear path. And one of the things, because regulation is so difficult and you have so many jurisdictions to cover, that it starts getting too tricky, right? And we are not at that stage yet. But there are some other ones that, as you say, in the financial services, I think that's a clear path on it. But we have been working on it for a while now. And the more we are exposing, bringing real-world access to the DeFi, the more people are starting to realize the benefits. And not just for the people that are providing the services, but also from the ecosystem, right? So one of the things that we realized in June when the whole Terra Luna saga happens is that a lot of the assets that are in the DeFi space are all correlated. and if one falls, then you are going to have what they call contagion, and it's domino effect, right? When you're starting bringing actually real-world assets, tokenized real-world assets that are representation, a digital asset that you can invest on as well, then you have an asset that is completely non-correlated to what's happening in the DeFi space. And that will provide a lot of sustainability, right? And growth. I think those are the two keys, right? Sustainability and growth. As we believe that as we are heading, the space is not sustainable and the growth is not there. We thought we were going to be in 700 billion, and we're not there yet at all, right? It's shrinking as it is. So that's a real business case. The other one that is really interesting is that we're seeing more and more in the luxury goods space. That is that concept that they call the phygital. That is a straight representation of a physical, or digital representation of a physical asset. And what they do with this is actually they're trying to minimize the risk of counterfeiting. And that's working really well. So you are seeing all the big brands, like luxury brands now, that are starting to adopt in this. Mm-hmm. Why? Because one of the main issues that those luxury brand supply chain have is actually inside jobs and counterfeiting that are coming through their own supply chains. And with this type of systems, a digitization of these really valuable assets, they can actually have a good hold of what is and what is not. Mm-hmm. So I think those two for me are really relevant. There is something that we're exploring as well in the whiskey industry. So we were just working with distilleries in Ireland, small distilleries, that usually small distilleries, what they have to do is they either do bypass products like vodka or gin in order to just continue having some funding, or they're selling the lower-based whiskey at way cheaper rates. So in that case, they keep maintaining. But if instead of that, what you are able to do is tokenizing a barrel, right? And lending funds on that barrel that you know that you can liquidate fairly easy, then you have a completely alternative source of liquidity that was never considered before. Because a lot of companies that are sitting on illiquid assets, but they have tremendous value. So tokenization actually is allowing or is providing a form for this to happen that before it was impossible.
I mean, one of the things I think is so exciting about banking as a profession is liquidity and pricing of risk. And I think the way these both have been expressed functionally have been perhaps lost in the weeds over time, and some of these new technologies to open up and democratize access to money.
You're spot on, right? Because one of the main components, when you start understanding why big traditional institutions are not providing the financing that is required at the moment, is because of the risk and how they're mitigating risk. And like cookie cutters that they do it right now is not going to just give money to someone in Tanzania, right? It's just impossible. Like it's never going to work. And what I'm saying is like now we have the technology. What if financial institutions, or the way that we see it is a lot of financial institutions in the future are going to be jumping on DeFi space, right? They're going to have multiple oracles that are providing tons of data to them. And what they're going to do is ingest data on one side and then just creating these tailor-made risk assessments that are going to just be accurate on what you can fund or what you can't fund. That's it. Right?
I agree with what you said. And I wanted to point out that what we saw earlier in the year that led to a lot of the crisis in the market with Luna and then Celsius was that these centralized entities are promising, they're promising security, safety, and they're lying to investors, but rarely they're over-leveraged, and you may as well put your money in, a shitcoin or some sort of high-risk asset, because that's basically what you're doing when you were putting your money in Luna or UST or Celsius, and I think we're really early. I think the whole space, the whole tokenization of everything. I know the government's currently looking at tokenizing property and real estate, but it's still really early stages. We've got CBDCs, centralized backed digital currencies. China's already implemented theirs. We're already in the process. USA, a lot of countries are already in the process of. So whether you like it or not, this is a really important subject that I think everyone is tied into. And the earlier you start understanding at least some of the basic principles, the further ahead you're going to get. And I think that's one of the main things to take from this talk is just try and, at least get some basic understanding. As technical as some of the aspects are that you were talking about then, even understanding the basics, you're miles ahead of the common person who's sort of just in the rat race, still stuck on Facebook, on Web 2, and, keeping up with the Joneses.
It's a really good segue, I think, to my final question, which I'll ask you all. I'd like to open up to Q&A, because I think we have a quite esteemed audience. We've talked about the role of corporates and how they can be good or bad in helping to resolve these new technologies. Do we think we need corporates in the tokenization of everything? And if so, what are the reasons that they would kind of be involved? And I think maybe to you, do you think there's any unicorns out there that we know of yet that are doing these things, or unicorns in the making?
Well, I think corporates definitely are playing a real, how can I say, function in our society. They're basically organizing work in such a way that allows capital markets to be then deployed into projects and then hiring people and producing products and services. So the basic of what a corporate does is this. So if we go in the direction of, say, change and breaking, for example, monopolies, I mean, there is this wave of, say, tearing down or breaking Google, breaking Facebook, and so on, will have to be built on DeFi. So DeFi on the centralized and so on. So I think there is a role definitely for new technologies. There is a role for companies which basically represent the vested interest of the way society currently works, and we are all working for corporates. So it would be naive to say that tomorrow we just with a stroke of pen, we say we're going to change the world. It's not going to be like that. But there are certain aspects, for example, where the centralized technologies need corporates, and where corporates need also these technologies. And there are certain countries, like for example, if you think about Africa, or developing countries, where you basically are jumping the vested interest of the financial system, and it's simpler, for example, to go to crypto for remittances, for example, or it's simpler to go to crypto just to hold your asset in a wallet. You don't need a bank, and or you just don't want to be exposed to the risk of the local currency. You prefer to have it in stable coins or something else. Those are situations where the centralized technologies have a role and can I say, find a faster adoption in the marketplace. So I think definitely there are certain things. And then last point, I think we are seeing now, for example, NFTs, just to name another technology, playing a role in how corporates are trying, for example, to build loyalty with users, or they are trying to build access to privileged services and so on. So there are many things that can be done around these things where blockchain and decentralization can play a role.
Thank you.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think it would be naive just to think that corporates are not going to be playing a role in this space, especially when you're studying about tokenization. Is just one of the things that have been away under control of corporates for a long time, that they have tons of experience, and I think we should just go into a model that will allow us to learn everything that these corporates are doing pretty well, apply it. One of them is UI, UX, for example. Corporates that base the whole business model on having that experience. We don't have that. And at some point, I assume that we will be able just to compete side to side, right, with them. That's the way I see it. But we're not there yet, and they still have a role to take on this.
Any closing comments, Sharon?
Yeah, I agree with what you said. I think it would be naive to think that corporations, would have no place in Web3 and the tokenization of everything. I think they'll have a massive role to play. My concerns are more the adoption and the regulations that come with that. It's an expansive subject, and it's one that has been discovered. And I think Web3 in itself is still in its very early stages. We're still understanding, the metaverse. We're still adding utility to NFTs. There's so much innovation happening. It's so exciting. It really is, you know. I mean, we sit here now sort of like, you know, it sounds kind of boring in some respects to some people maybe, but I think that's super exciting. And it's a space you need to be involved in, not just financially, but I think mentally. It's really interesting.
Thank you.
Sean, if I can, I just wanted to add one thing. You know, the fastest way to adoption to Web3 would be that basically Web2 is embracing Web3. So think about PayPal, think about all these big players that have already like massive millions of users. They just open a wallet for you, and then all of a sudden you can start to do many. Now, that's clearly, how can I say, going against the philosophy of why you need Web3 and why you want to break down monopolies. But if you want to have fast adoption, that's the way to go.
Yes, and I think you mentioned the example of what's happening in China. I mean, there are risks in this if we do this without good governance and kind of centralized corporates behaving sometimes in less than savory ways.
Yeah, I mean, in China, the CBDC that they're implementing, let me just point out that CBDC isn't pegged or backed. It actually is the currency. And what China are doing is sort of forcing people to spend their money on certain areas or certain shops, giving them a certain amount of time to do that, and they're gaining a lot more control. You know, you've got that whole communist sort of backed. I'm not even going to go into the politics of it all, but this is a prime example of exactly what we're talking about now, of what can happen when corporations get the wrong end of the stick. Yeah. So we need to be careful and make sure we try and stay on the right side of things.
Stay free. I think there is time for some questions, if I may, the lady.
Hi, I'm Anna. I'm a business developer from Cointelegraph, and the bunch of startups that we are on board providing due diligence to relating to tokenization itself. Soon we'll announce the name of our portfolio, and one of these projects is exactly a connection with tokenization. Ethereum. So they tokenize alcohol, cars, and we have a bunch of upcoming projects in the same area. So what is your down-to-earth advice? What they have to pay attention at? I mean, blockchain really doesn't matter. What matters? User experience, legislation support. Yeah. What is your opinion? How we can help these startups to raise, to develop, and to bring real value product to the market? Thank you.
I can go. Those two that you mentioned, clearly, right? Like a UI UX, as I've been saying, like is critical. If you want to just generate adoption, we need UI UX. Without that, it's complex. Everybody here probably has a MetaMask wallet, and probably every single time that you are seeing a transaction that is more than $1,000, probably you check that 5 times, then cross and figure out that arrives on the other side, right? It's just, there's no safety in it. And if we don't change that, adoption is not there. The other one is regulation, because regulation is changing at quite fast pace. For first time I'm seeing regulators moving at a different pace, especially here in Europe. Well, we are not in Europe anymore, but for the companies like mine that are based in Europe, it's moving quite fast, right? So you need to be always in tune of what is happening. And that's key, especially when you're talking about real-world assets, right? When you're talking about full decentralized play, it's okay. When you're talking about real-world assets and you're going into the financial space, even harder, because you have all that detailed side from the regulatory perspective, plus the financial regulations that is there. So merging those two can be tricky sometimes, right? And just creating a business model that is sustainable out of it. So yeah, those two for me are critical.
Thank you. Any other questions?
What's your opinion on the legal element of recognition of an NFT when it's a tokenized asset like real estate? Where do you think we are with, how far away are we from regulators regulating the process, but potentially the legal recognition of ownership to say if it's stolen or the liability of that ownership of that NFT? Where do you think we are with that?
Years, I believe years. Like so far, everything that we do that is in the real world asset space is backed up by a legal contract or an agreement, because at the moment you take an NFT to court that represents a financial transaction, is not standing. There have been some jurisdictions that are starting looking at. There were a couple of cases here in London actually where people are starting bringing NFTs, and a court starting kind of ruling on it. But there is a huge gap in there. And I believe it will take years, right, for that to just go through.
You normally find that regulation comes a lot later after the technology itself. So normally the governments wait for technology to play out so they can understand how they can regulate it properly. And that is normally a process that does take a few years. So, like you said, probably 3, 4, 5. It's hard to say when technology is progressing and innovation is happening so fast. It's hard to regulate that. Take time.
If I can quickly make a point on that, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not in a position to comment. But there was a very interesting article on the weekly newsletter which comes out from Andreessen Horowitz, which was around NFT and intellectual ownership. And so it was explaining how the NFT, was using the common, say, licensing framework, which has been around, for example, used also by Wikipedia and others. And in other cases, they were using all the traditional IP or completely disregarding IP protection and simply going ahead with that. They were also offering some sort of templates to be used by founders in terms of adapting a legal framework for NFTs. So I'm not an expert, but I would recommend maybe to have a look at that. That
there is a Pandora box, right? You start looking at it when you are just purchasing NFTs, and you don't know if you are buying the rights, the IP, or you are buying actually the lot that is including like the actual digital asset. That there, so far nothing has happened, right? But that's a huge risk that at some point someone is going to exploit.
Thank you. I think there's time for one more question. I didn't have one from this side, so one of you two. The lady in grey. Yes.
Question for all of you, and maybe specifically to Alejandro. So let's say I'm a whiskey producer that you say you work with. If I go and source funding from a traditional bank, I know where my spread is, I know how I'm going to, I could understand the transaction cost of how much money is costing. When I'm trying to raise the funding from the NFT space, I understand you never quite know how much it will cost you. So how do you think about it yourselves as well as when you work with your clients?
So why wouldn't you know the cost of the funding?
Well, depending on where you go to manufacture these things, your PSVs or what you pay could be highly variable. Right? So when I raise funding for my stuff, I want to know ultimately how much I will need to pay. I raise $100, how much I will need to pay to someone who helps me structure that.
It works exactly the same as in traditional. Yeah, you will have some gas fees, but it depends on which chain you are working. Those can be completely negligible, right? Like they're negligible. Sorry, they're nothing. And everything that we do is based in stable coins, so there is no risk of variability there. So when you are signing, let's say, an agreement for say a trade finance transaction, you know exactly how much you're going to be receiving, and you know how much exactly you're going to be paying at the end. There's no difference. Yeah. The only difference is the engagement, or the way that is engaged is you tokenize that asset. That asset goes into a liquidity pool, gets locked in there. Then you are going to be able to extract stable coins. They will go into your wallet, and then you have RAM, and that's it, right? And then when you are repaying, it's the opposite. So you take your stable coin, you repay to a liquidity pool, and then the asset is released. That asset that you locked over there is released. And depending of the class of that asset, so you either can use it again for future financial services, or you want to sell it, or if it's, for example, an invoice, you burn it, because an invoice has a really short period that is valuable for, right?
Great, thank you. I think that was the last question, but just as a summary, it seems tokenization of everything is the direction of travel, but it seems some things will be tokenized before others, and some use cases, including lending, perhaps, would be a focus area. Hopefully democratization and freedom are baked in, but thank you all very much for your contributions.
Thanks to everybody.